So everything that we've covered in this very short class will serve you really well. Whether you've been studying for many years or you're just new to Buddhism, this really gives you the foundation for continuing your studies and your meditation practice. And I just wanted to point out that we've got a whole series of guest speakers coming to Dona Kumpenling. So I think it's even starting next Sunday. So we've got an excellent lineup of speakers that Gloria has worked very hard to line up for us. So please, take a look at the calendar, and anything that's up and coming, you are very welcome and in a good place to attend and learn from. So, so I guess we will go ahead and get started. So we are so fortunate to have attained the precious human rebirth. So that's sort of Dharma language for saying, for being born human, right? And the fact that we've attained the human rebirth is evidenced, when you just look at yourself, think of yourself, and really think that you're perfect. Just where you are now, you're perfect. Look at this dog. This dog's perfect. I'm very impressed. We have a beautifully trained dog. So you're perfect. Just the way you are, you're perfect. To be able to be here as a human being or a well-behaved dog, you've accumulated so much merit over many lifetimes, right? Or even just this one lifetime. You've done something good to be able to be here as a human being, right? So that means you've engaged in all of the bodhisattva practices in one form or another, right? You've practiced generosity. You've given away all your possessions. You've given away your life to help others. You've practiced patience. You haven't retaliated. You haven't met anger with anger when a crabby person has gotten mad at you, right? You've given away all your wealth. You don't get angry at your noisy neighbors. You've endured all different kinds of hardships in order to be able to practice the Dharma, right? You've driven long distances. You've given, you've told your friends and family, no, I'm sorry, I'm busy Sunday morning. And they're like, what? We want to go out and party. And you're like, no, I'm going to sit here and go to a Dharma class. So the point is that you've created the causes and conditions to be born as a human being, right? It's not just like random, oh, I popped out as a human being. No, you created the causes and conditions to be here. And so the message being that you've attained the precious human rebirth, you've worked so hard, so don't let this precious opportunity slip away, right? So, the old slogan is like, you only live once. So in the Buddhist sense, it's right, okay, you only live once. That's not quite true, but the point is that we're here today, now together. What better, way to spend this precious human rebirth than to engage in helping others? So you've done so much good. You've supported and helped and served so many others in countless ways. And so we continue to do so now, and we aspire to continue to do so, to grow our hearts, to grow our compassion in the future. We're not going to give up, right? So this is a life well lived. And we can do whatever we need to help the others around us. So don't let, as we said in the last class, don't let the little guy sitting on your left shoulder, we'll call that guy Bozo, that self-critical naysayer, tell you otherwise, okay? So this is the evil little voice that says, you can't change for the better. You can't change, give it up because, you're too old, you're too dumb, you're too ugly. whatever excuses, Bozo comes up with, the excuse of the day, right? You can't do it. But on the right shoulder, I was thinking about this some more, on the right shoulder, maybe you've got Dingus. What does Dingus say? Dingus is the guy who says, I'm too good for this. This is pride speaking. He's like, hey, hold my beer. I got this, right? And he drags you into a ton of trouble. At your heart, maybe there's a little guy called Doofus. Doofus is that scared, vulnerable little child who clutches at that false appearance of the self. That false appearance of a self in the sense that it feels so permanent. It feels so inherently existing, free of causes and conditions. It's a self, that permanent self that doesn't exist. And so we can, or we should recognize that all of this is just unsubstantiated, fleeting thoughts. It's that little mental chatter. And so we don't need to pay any attention to those little voices. Bozo, Doofus, and Dingus. It took me a long time to come up with those names. I even asked my son. So whenever you first notice, that you're having a bozo moment, right? You just laugh it off, right? You say, oh, it's you again. Okay, see you. So this is really, really important advice, both as kind of like a life coaching skill and in terms of our spiritual journey. Right? It all goes together. And so particularly in terms of studying the Dharma, so many of us, like myself, will watch a few YouTube videos of the great lamas, and you're like, oh, we might even read a few books, might even meditate once in a while when we have a few minutes. But, do we actually make an effort to put the teachings into practice? Do I listen to Bozo? Do I give up? When Bozo says, hey, you know what? Dharma practice is too challenging. Those books are really big and thick. I'm too angry. I'm too selfish. The people around me, forget it. They're just like way too hostile. They're not supporting me, blah, 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 right? I don't have time to meditate. Who am I kidding? How am I ever going to make it to enlightenment, right? That thought, it does come up once in a while, right? If I can't even make it to enlighten myself, forget about helping countless, limitless beings, right? How am I going to be able to help anybody if I can't help myself? So meditation is extremely important, right, as a method for transforming our minds so that we can get rid of Bozo, Dingus, and Doofus forever. So I mentioned a meditation technique in the last session known as, the acronym is RAIN, and it's derived from teachings by the great Burmese meditation teacher, Mahasi Sayadaw, whose book, Manual of Insight, has helped popularize Vipassana meditation. So R is for to recognize the stream of thoughts. A stands for acceptance, to accept whatever has arisen. I is then to inspect the stream of mental traffic. And N stands for nurture. So meaning to be gentle and self-compassionate with whatever has, whatever feelings, when thoughts arise. And I suggested that in the Tibetan tradition, N is more likely to mean, no, right? It's saying no. And we need to be very forceful to defeat our inner enemy. And so verse 78 in the Wheel of Sharp Weapons, I just wanted to bring out that language because I think this is a really important point to show that the intensity of this determination to uproot, these negative emotions and to really put great effort into cultivating the tools normally, practicing the method and wisdom aspects of the path, right? So verse 78 says, my frustration is intense and my thoughts are coarser than everyone else's. I'm hard to get along with, and I continually provoke others' bad character. Roar and thunder on the head of the destroyer, false construction. Mortally strike at the heart of the butcher, the enemy ego. Okay, so without analyzing the verse in great detail, the point just being here that the language is pointing out that the true enemy is the ego, right? And so that's what we need to overcome. So we're overcoming, our own mental afflictions of frustration and anger, understanding that those feelings are derived from or the product of actions that we've created, in this life and the past, right? So the ultimate source then is ignorance. So as we have been discussing, our habitual way of thinking, right? So we mistake suffering for pleasure. We mistake impermanent things as being permanent. We grasp onto a non-existent self. So all of this wrong thinking causes us to harm others, right? Just like in the quote, to harm others, which results in the accumulation of negative karma or negative habitual tendencies and these destructive emotions, right? So all of that is what, right? That's the shaming and blaming, the guilt, the anxiety, the unhappiness. All of these are like ingredients that we put together, that come together like in a big beef stew, in some kind of stew, in the boiling cauldron that's samsara. So in his teaching on the third noble truth, Buddha explained that we can definitely put an end to our experience of samsara if we choose to, right? So we don't have to stay in the beef stew cauldron. We can get out, right? It's a choice. So why is it that we have the ability to break free? And so here's a little quote from the Dalai Lama in the book Approaching the Buddhist Path. He explains that there are two factors that make liberation possible. The clear light nature of the mind being one, and the second being the adventitious nature of the defilements. So what's the clear light nature of the mind? Well, that refers to the basic capacity of the mind to cognize objects. So it's the clear and cognizant nature. So the mind's failure to know objects must then be due to obstructing factors. In some cases, obstructing factors may be physical. So like if you put your hand over your eyes, and you can't see, that's a physical obstructing factor. But here, in a deeper sense, our seeing is hindered by two types of obstructions. And they're known as afflictive obscurations that prevent liberation from cyclic existence. So a negative emotions, the negative afflictions. And the second being the cognitive obscurations that prevent omniscience. So cognitive obscurations meaning that thick layer of ignorance. Okay. So both of those are temporary, and so our goal then, as spiritual practitioners on the Buddhist path, would then be to remove those two factors. Okay. So ignorance, again, is what causes us to conceive of things as being inherently existent. It's as though it applies like a transparent, clear varnish on everything around us, and that makes us see things as being inherently existent. So something, extra that's added by the mind. So that means that things exist without depending on causes and conditions. That's what we assume. That's what we like to, are duped into thinking. Okay. So again, the Dalai Lama explains they appear as independent discrete objects that exist under their own power with their own inherent essence from their own side. This appearance of objects as existing in their own right is false, and the idea that objects exist in that way is erroneous and can be refuted by reasoning. And wisdom then is the destroyer of ignorance. Right? So through careful analysis and reasoning, we wield the sword of wisdom that cuts through ignorance. And because of the two factors, the mind being of the nature of clear light and the destructive emotions being adventitious, then, as I said earlier, so liberation is definitely possible. So the Sublime Continuum says, this clear and luminous nature of mind is as changeless as space. It's not afflicted by desire and so on, the adventitious stains that spring from false conceptions. So here we're taking a look at the ultimate nature of the mind, right? So what is the mind after you remove all of the cognitive obscurations and the afflictive obscurations? What's left, right? We're washing, we're polishing, removing all of the contaminants. Well, then what are you left with, right? That's what we're trying to describe here. So the clear and luminous nature of mind is as changeless as space. It's not afflicted by desire and so on, which are the adventitious stains that spring from false conceptions. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama explains this very clearly. He says, when we examine that separation from defilements, we discover it is the ultimate nature of the mind that is free from defilements. This ultimate nature of mind exists from beginningless time. It exists as long as there is mind. In the continuum of sentient beings, the ultimate nature of the mind is called Buddha nature or Buddha potential. When it becomes endowed with the quality of having separated from the defilements, it's called nirvana. Therefore, the very basis for nirvana, the emptiness of the mind, is always with us. It's not something that is newly created or gained from outside of us. Okay. So everyone, all living beings, all sentient beings have this innate, Buddha nature or Buddha potential. It's not something, that we create or that somebody gives us. It's always, within the mental continuum, so to speak. But through the active and conscious process of removing the contaminants, then we reveal something, that we allow this Buddha nature to manifest, right? That's always been there. It's a very interesting, beautiful idea. And so the fourth of the four seals that we've been talking about, using that as the theme for this course, the fourth one was that nirvana is peace. So that's what we're looking at now. Nirvana is peace. And so another quote from the Sublime Continuum. I have here. So it starts with enlightenment, of which the Buddha said, it is by nature clear light, is similar to the sun and space. It is free from the stains of the adventitious poisons and hindrances to knowledge, the veils of which obscured it like a dense sea of clouds. Buddhahood is permanent, steadfast, and immutable, possessing all the unpolluted Buddha qualities. It is attained on the basis of two primordial wisdoms. One is free from ideation with regard to phenomena. The other is discriminative. Okay, and then the passage goes on. So by way of explanation, so luminous clear light is not created. It is indivisibly manifest in the nature of beings and holds all the Buddha properties, outnumbering the grains of sand in the river Ganges. By nature not existent, pervasive and adventitious, the veils of the poisons and of the hindrances to knowledge are described as being similar to a cloud. Twofold wisdom causes release from the two veils. Since there is the one fault that is free from ideation and the one ensuing from this in post-meditation, it is held that there are two primordial wisdoms. So enlightenment is a state that is free from the sufferings of birth, old age, sickness, and death, right? So no more delusions are generated in the mind, because all of that obscuration, all the obscurations have been eliminated, right? And so we're not generating the causes to assume a physical body anymore, per se. So a person who has an enlightened mind is free of both delusions and the suffering that arises from the delusions. Okay. So Buddha outlined the path leading to the cessation of suffering in the Fourth Noble Truth. So we were talking about the Third Noble Truth and how that is Buddha's explanation of the cessation of the result, right? The result is enlightenment. And then in the Fourth Noble Truth, Buddha explained, okay, that's wonderful. So how do we end up there, right? So we were talking about the fruition of the path, and what is the path to the cessation of suffering? So with the Fourth Noble Truth, Buddha explained three foundational practices or three foundational trainings, and these form the basis of the truth of the path, right? And so the three foundational trainings are ethical conduct, moral conduct, ethical conduct, concentration, single pointed concentration, and wisdom. So we've touched on these throughout the course, but ethical conduct then is restraining, actions of body, speech, and mind, making sure that we're not harming others. And so it's kind of the fuel that keeps us going through our spiritual journey, so that we can make progress on the path. It's compared to a lamp, which needs both a sufficient amount and quality of fuel to be able to burn clearly for a long time. So ethical conduct is that which sustains, our Dharma practice. And then the superior form of ethical conduct then is taking the ordination vows. Single-pointed concentration enables us to focus the mind, right? You have to be able to focus your mind so that you can engage in the rigorous analysis and application of reasoning that are involved in cultivating wisdom. Okay, you got to read those big thick books, right? You got to be able to concentrate when you're reading the big thick book. You're not like reading the big thick book and then you're like, oh, what's on Netflix? What's on my phone, right? You got to have an excellent concentration to be able to push you through that, right? Excellent concentration. So the point being that, concentration and wisdom, those two skills, right, they go together hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. Without the concentration, you're not going to be able to do the analysis and meditate to make any progress in the development of wisdom. And then likewise, if you somehow just have wisdom, but you don't have concentration, that's not going to happen. So that isn't to say that, those three practices are so advanced that, only, high level practitioners, people, like yogis living in caves in the Himalayas, that's just for them. That's not the case at all. Instead, the point is that these are practices that we can be training in right now, right? You don't get to be the yogi in the Himalayas unless wherever you are right now, you're doing these practices, you're getting started, doing the best that you can, right? So ethical conduct, concentration, and wisdom, practices which we can train in right now. So it's just that, those practices are then taken to the next level by bodhisattvas, right? And what's a bodhisattva? Bodhisattva is somebody whose intention is to attain enlightenment and whose motivation is to do so for the benefit of all living beings, right? So bodhisattva's goal or fervent aspiration then is to free all living beings from every kind of suffering imaginable. So with every action of a bodhisattva's, body, speech, and mind, every action then is single-pointedly focused on virtue, right? Virtue meaning not harming others. So as a result, a bodhisattva's practice of these same three trainings, ethical conduct, concentration, and the cultivation of wisdom, are superior to that of an ordinary individual. But we have to start somewhere. We have to start where we are now. All right. So generating a mind that cherishes others more than ourselves, this mind of enlightenment, this mind of bodhicitta, a mind that cherishes others more than ourselves, it begins with abandoning self-cherishing, right? That's what we've been talking about the whole time. Abandoning self-cherishing, and we do so by reflecting on the disadvantages of self-cherishing. Okay, so so there's this wonderful book which I thought I had on my little computer, but it didn't make it. But anyway, it's called the Lam Rim Year, and it's available as a download for a small donation of your choice from the Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archives. It's called the Lam Rim Year. And so it's a collection of daily one-page meditation readings, so to speak, on every topic of the Lam Rim. So it's really an amazing book. I mean, the students put a lot of work into distilling Lama Zopa Rinpoche's advice, as well as Lama Zopa Rinpoche's teacher, Lama Yeshe. So I strongly encourage you to read it and meditate on it. because it's just presented in such a beautiful, easily understood way. It's really quite remarkable. So every day, your daily practice, people sometimes say, well, what should I do in my daily practice? Your daily practice could be maybe, you sit for 20 minutes, or however long, you do your sitting meditation. And then you maybe read, one of these short passages. So that way you'd be developing, concentration, wisdom, and ethical conduct all at the same time, right? Very efficient. No more, like picking up books and like randomly opening them up. You got it all in one place. Okay. So on day 318, which is the section on the Mahayana, on the Bodhisattva practices, right? So this was Lama Zopa Rinpoche explaining the disadvantages of self-cherishing. So no matter what difficult circumstances arise, we should put all the blame on the self-cherishing thought. We must recollect how every difficulty is due to the shortcomings of self-cherishing. Then, on top of that, we give back to the self-cherishing thought all the problems and undesirable things that the self-cherishing thought has given us. The self-cherishing mind wants us to look elsewhere for the source of our problems. But with this practice, we lay the blame squarely on the root cause, self-cherishing itself. Whatever energy we would have used to eliminate an external problem can now be used instead to eliminate our self-cherishing. It's especially effective to use our fears about being judged or criticized to destroy self-cherishing. If we can do this continually, then fears, worries, and paranoia cannot arise. This is the deep, essential psychology that really wipes out the self-cherishing thought, the source of all our problems, and makes it non-existent. So we're turning, that energy around. I think that's really a beautiful passage. So whatever energy we would have used to eliminate an external problem, right? Seeing that we're experiencing some kind of, hardship, whether it's, somebody robbing us or our house burning down in a wildfire, whatever it is, some kind of horrible hardship. All of that comes back down to that sense of self, right? It's my house, it's my property, my possession. So, hardships will always arise, but we can use the energy that we would have put on that anger, that blaming, that lawsuits or whatever. Instead, use that same hardship as a way of identifying and uprooting the self-cherishing thought. So by giving up self-cherishing, then our relationships with others become open, and spacious, right? Because the basis for discriminating between stranger, friend, and enemies, no longer arises, right? If there's no self, then all of those other categories of external people, right? All of that goes away too. And that being the case, we can then recognize the fundamental equality of all living beings. So the first step is, by working on uprooting that sense of ego or self, once that is diminished or completely gotten rid of, then those categories of stranger, friend, and enemy, those automatically, go away at the same time. So that's the bonus, right? And that opens the door for us to be able to recognize then the fundamental equality of all living beings and how we all wish for happiness and to be free from misery. And as a result of meditating, very, very, very extensively on suffering, remember the different kinds of suffering? We covered that in one of the classes. We just gave a little bit of a high-level overview, saying that there are like 8 kinds of suffering, or there could be 6 or 3, right? But the most important being, that idea of pervasive suffering, right? Pervasive suffering, meaning that we're in the very nature of suffering, right? We are suffering. It's not like suffering's out there. We are in the nature of suffering, okay? So we're meditating very extensively on the different kinds of suffering and the law of karmic cause and effect, and the relationship between karma, cause and effect, and the negative emotions, right? All of this, we really, really take our time. We read the Lamrim Yer, we read that book over and over again, do those meditations over and over again. And then what happens? What happens is, we find that our hearts start to melt, right? Our hearts start to soften, right? When you see that all sentient beings are in the same boat, right? And they're all like under the control of karma and the negative emotions, right? That all of this suffering is actually optional, right? Wow, that's such a sense of closeness, of kinship arises. So we recognize that our relationships with others is actually one, a very, very close interdependency that's likened to the bonds between a mother or father and a child. Right? A very, very close interdependency. And so due to the spontaneous sense of empathy, connection or kinship, and very importantly, a very sincere gratitude, a really deep-seated sense of appreciation and gratitude. All of that, arises from this reflection. And that then gives rise to 2 things, right? To love and to compassion. And so love is that very tender wish for all sentient beings to have happiness. And compassion then is the wish for all sentient beings to be free from suffering. Thank you. So love and compassion then emerge for all living beings, right? Not choosing some and disregarding others. For all sentient beings, because we're all in the same boat together, then the sense of interdependency and sincere appreciation for all that we've received and that we continue to receive from those around us. Right? You really take the time to think that all mother sentient beings or father sentient beings, are critical for our own survival, right? Not just in this life, but in previous lives. We can't do this without depending on infinite numbers of beings, right? And so the wish to repay that kindness is crucial. That's kind of the whole part of the Bodhisattva path, right? We're saying that I'm not in this for myself. I'm doing this for all living beings. Well, why am I doing it for all living beings? Because they're all like my mothers, and I got to repay their kindness. Okay, so that's kind of the logic, right? The beauty of the logic then is I need to repay the kindness of all beings because of this intricate, network of interdependency, of connection with others. So not only do we feel this, very strong, fresh, pure kind of love and compassion, but a special characteristic of the Mahayana tradition then is that we voluntarily take personal responsibility for freeing all mother sentient beings, right? So we take this, sort of to another level, and we say, by myself alone, all sentient beings will be free from suffering, right? So we can't simply, turn our backs on our mothers and fathers and their misery. We can't simply, just walk away. So, how do we do this? And the Buddha, and all of the wonderful lamas who have shared and explained the Buddha's teachings, very extensively, have given beautiful, detailed instructions on how to actually do this, right? And so in the, again, in the Mahayana tradition, there's a technique called Losang, or thought transformation. And so on day 316 of the Lamrimir, Lama Zopa Rinpoche said, he explains this, the Mahayana technique called Losang, or thought transformation, or mind training, right, is essentially about transforming any situation into one conducive to the path. We view every situation as positive, using whatever we meet as a means to develop our mind in wisdom and compassion. There is no such thing as a bad situation other than what is labeled by our mind. We could just as easily label it as good. So the core practice of the Mahayana tradition then, or actually I don't think it's just the Mahayana tradition, but the core practice here is to transform hardships into opportunities for spiritual growth, right? So if there's one thing that you get out of, this course, I don't know how many people made it through all 4 sessions, but anyway, just for today, right? The most important point then is to be able to transform suffering into happiness, right? Because that really goes against the way we normally think. At least it does for me, right? Usually something, difficult happens to me, like I lose my car keys, or I don't know, whatever, it's something more serious than that, right? And I just sit around and I wallow in my unhappiness. But instead, what we should be doing is actually being thankful, being happy that somebody, scratched your car, whatever it is, right? Because it's an opportunity to then identify, the source of the unhappiness, the unhappy reaction, right? The source being right here, me, myself, and I. Right? That's self-cherishing. Okay, and uprooting self-cherishing is what we're trying to do. And so when somebody provokes you into seeing that self-cherishing mind, then that's a good thing, right? That's a good thing, because that gives you an opportunity to practice, right? So for example, if you're trying to train your dog, right, and you're out there and your dog is, let's say you have a reactive dog, a dog that doesn't do well when it sees other dogs or something, right? So you need to actually go out there and ideally, you set up a situation so that the dog doesn't get too upset. So you practice, having another dog come over and you stay, a certain distance apart. And then slowly, 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 if the dog doesn't react, then you can get a little bit closer, right? So you're practicing, training. And then if you're out there one day and then somebody does, bring their dog too close and their dog is reactive and your dog barks, right? Instead of getting like all upset about it, it's like, oh my God, my dog's terrible. I'm a bad trainer. I don't know anything. The other dog's a jerk for getting too close to me, blah, 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 right? Making this little small incident into something huge, right? A big conflagration that you just, have to go see a psychologist for because you're so upset. Or worse, like you're working with a trainer and so you go home and you're like, you're texting and emailing the guy explaining what happened, blah, 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 right? And then the trainer, responds, gets the email, maybe a day later, 2 days later, because they're really busy, right? And then they read the email and they're like, oh, and then they get back to you, and maybe even they pick up the phone and call you and they say, oh, really, blah, 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 and they've got a whole plan in their mind, right? And then you're like, what? Oh, yeah. No, it's fine now. We're good. Right? So you have to be really careful because you just put that whole experience, and you shared it, but it's gone, right? The point being that it's temporary, it's over, it's not like you don't have to get so caught up in it. Just deal with it, let it go. Don't make it into something bigger than it has to be, right? Does that happen all the time? Yeah, not just with dog training. Okay.
My friends gave me the superpower of being able to make a mountain out of a molehill and leave it in a single bound.
I love it.
So my big thing was making a big deal out of nothing and then coming to the rescue.
Right.
Solving the problem that was not a problem and then feeling really good about myself. Showing everyone they should have done it.
Right.
That just pinpointed 20 years of my life.
That's hysterical. Okay, so there are many different teachings on how to do on mind training, on Losang training, right? So you can pick up many beautiful books on from many different masters. So one of them was was originated from Atisha. Okay, who's one of the founders of the Lamrim tradition, right? So Atisha has beautiful Losang teaching called the 7-point mind training, which I'm sure many of you have heard of. But he says, so I'm just picking one random, very important sentence. It kind of encapsulates everything that we've been talking about so far. When the environment and its inhabitants are enslaved by evil, transform unfavorable circumstances into the path of awakening. And so this book has the root text and a commentary by Alan Wallace, right? The very famous, wonderful teacher, Alan Wallace. And he writes, it's very funny. He's got a great sense of humor. So if you ever want a good, funny book that's very profound, very helpful, very clear, this is one of his earlier works, right? It came out in 1992 and 2004. Really beautiful book. So in explaining that particular quote, he says, misfortunes and obstacles to practice do not exist intrinsically, right? So for something to be a misfortune for me, I must identify it as such. If I refuse to identify something as an obstacle, but say instead to myself, I accept this illness or whatever hardship it is, right? I accept this illness as a blessing of my spiritual guide and of the Buddha, then it becomes so. It takes much courage and knowledge of Dharma to say that and to mean it and to act accordingly, but it is extremely potent. We can then rebound from these calamities with courage and understanding instead of wilting under their pressure. And this is necessary for a deep and fruitful practice. So why do we see the hardships as a blessing from, our spiritual guides and the Buddha? Why is that?
Practice is maybe, more when you go through something, you just, how I would say is you thicker skin, like calluses almost.
Uh-huh.
You kind of develop calluses and like silver lining. You're also
Okay.
beauty in the pain. You choose to see it that way, or if you utilize it as to make you stronger versus seeing it as being a victim, I guess.
Right. Okay. Beautiful. Thank you. And so then also in the I actually had it here. Oh, so smart. Oh my goodness. I'm looking for the book and I actually copied and pasted it right here. Ooh, you guys are lucky. All right. Lama Tripa, the Guru Puja. The beautiful, beautiful Guru Puja. Lama Tripa is one of the prayers that we do very, very often as a way of enhancing and deepening our connection with our teachers. So we're thanking them and making many, many extensive offerings. And so at the end of the prayer, there's a short summary of the entire Lamrim path, Mahayana Lamrim path. And so I wanted to just read some of these verses because they kind of are a good summary of what it means to practice Mahayana. Okay, here we go. One second. Right, because it's got this. Okay. All these tormented beings are my mothers, repeatedly caring for me kindly. Reflecting on this like a loving mother for her darling child, let me develop unfeigned compassion. Bless me thus. As no one desires the slightest suffering, nor ever has enough of happiness, there is no difference between myself and others. So let me make others joyfully happy. Bless me thus. Therefore, venerable and compassionate gurus, by my letting all the black karmic obscurations and suffering of mother sentient beings ripen upon me right now, and giving to others my happiness and good deeds, may all sentient beings have happiness. Bless me thus. Though the whole world and its beings are full of the fruits of non-virtue and undesired sufferings poured down upon me like rain, by seeing they've a chance to use up the fruits of bad karma, let me use bad conditions in the path. Oh, bless me thus. In short, whatever appearance, good or bad, comes up, by practicing the 5 forces, the essence of all dharma, let me change it to a path to develop the 2 bodhicittas and entertain only happiness of mind. Bless me thus. All right. So we're going to conclude the session with a practice known as Tonglen, which again, some of you I'm sure have done before, or the taking and giving meditation. And so we can do this sort of as a guided meditation. But does anybody have any questions before we do that? We still have half an hour, so open discussion time. I'd be really happy to hear from you in terms of not just specific questions, but if there's anything in particular that you found helpful, that you learned from this class.
I just wanted to ask, as far as I have PTSD, or I've labeled it as PTSD, and I associate sounds, and it kind of roots back to even being a child being stung by like a hornet. So that that resonance or the vibration of the D is for me traumatizing. So I think growing up in Manhattan as well, just like train sirens, airplanes, believe it or not, that's associated to me with like early childhood. So when I find myself in like a gamma state, if that makes sense, um, I'm I'm more heightened to sounds. So that's so even as simple as just like someone on a Sunday being in a propeller plane, they could be having a good time. To me, my perspective is that, I guess tying back to that gamma state, it's just like Shaolin, very aware. And for me, my experience is that, just that train sound moments ago versus in the, I associate, so that's just me. So one time, I guess more of a question is, if you were in my shoes, I'm trying to work through not just, again, my bipolar, the work, but PTSD. Um, if you were in my shoes, how would you articulate, uh, maybe a method of trying to cope with that issue and personally doing?
So in terms of not maybe being triggered or not being, okay. So that's a big question. And it's very personal. So I don't want, I think without knowing you, and the broader context, I don't want to say something that would just not be right. But
for 22-year-olds, I guess, dealing with 22-year-old things.
That I can relate to because I have a son who's 23. But I think I think the first part, that if we think of this maybe by applying like the rain meditation or process of analysis. Yeah, so recognizing when the trigger is there, right? And then maybe accepting that.
It's like a bubble, or like an idea.
Yeah,
I was
if that's helpful.
There are 70,000 thoughts we have in a day. It's probably more than that. But how I choose to see it is like a bubble, almost like we have seven. For me, it's let's say 70,000 ideas, and just we choose to see what to focus on.
What to filter, right? So that would be
what I was told, but our mentors tried to help me. A part of my issue is that I need to not be in gamma as far as, I don't know, from what I was told and what I've studied. I guess without knowing me, I'm learning reduction and boils down to love for me personally. And I was told by a mentor that there's kind of two sides to see things, and this ties in with what I'm trying to learn, and always trying to learn and stay a student. But as far as seeing it two sides, like love, caring, kindness, respect, and then like that's black and white thinking maybe, and then the other side is, I think my mentor told me a lot of people think it's hate, but it's fear. I guess I don't know if that's correct, or I have to say it that way, but I lately I've been trying to reside in that state of love, caring, kindness, respect as a choice, like having those bubbles. That's what I'll focus on, I guess, is what I'm personally dealing with right now. But I hope that I'm sure, like you said, you've been there, just having life experience and wisdom. So I don't know if I have a question. I'm just talking out loud.
Well, maybe that's where the end being nurturing, maybe in your case, right? Maybe the end being open to the experience, but treating it very tenderly, very carefully, with self-compassion and not with fear, right? Maybe that versus end meaning no, and being very forceful. Maybe that would not be the best approach for you. Or maybe depending exactly on what else is going on, maybe sometimes, you know, it could go back and forth, but
Maybe
I
last
think
week I
more.
talked about not judging a book by its cover, but without making assumptions, I guess, is what I
Yeah.
should focus on. Maybe the third, I don't know. But that's how I'm choosing to see it now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you.
You're not alone. Any other thing that anyone has? Comments? Questions? We got 14 people online. You guys are being very quiet. You can put it in the chat. I have the little chat box open if that's.
Honey,
Hi, Louisa.
hi. So you were doing a brief quote on Alan Wallace from Alan Wallace's book, and I was just wondering if you could share the title of that book, please. The 7 Points of Mind Training. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Louisa is into books. I have to be careful what I hold up because she'll go out and get it. It's like, oh,
That is a
here's the other one. I didn't bring all of them. But here's Buddha nature. This is a huge topic. Very beautiful. Very, very beautiful. If you ever have time, study more Buddha nature. Gimei Kensei Rinpoche is giving a teaching for one of the centers, one of the California centers. I think maybe Tianjin. Is it Tianjin?
Honey, is the author also Alan Wallace?
Oh, this one, Buddha nature. So this is question. I picked it up. Kempo Tsutrum Gyatso Rinpoche.
Okay, thank you.
So it's also published by Snow Lion. Buddha nature is written down by, so it's a Sangha's version. And it was published in 2000.
Very good. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. David?
Yeah, I just want to go back to something that you had said midway with the talk. And I made just a note of this, talking about getting rid of the cognitive kind of defilements that we practice sort of with some automaticity. And once going through that process, allowing sort of the natural Buddha nature to kind of manifest. And that just made me think of, I had read a book recently about Michelangelo. And when he was asked about how he could have produced such a beautiful sculpture as the David, his answer was that the David was already in the block of marble, and his role was to chip away at the outside in order to reveal what was already there.
Yeah.
And you started the lecture by saying that we are all perfect just where we are at that moment. And so when you started with that line and then talked about the defilement of the cognitive distortions sort of leading to Buddha nature, it made me think of what Michelangelo said, that we're all sort of, in some ways, presenting ourselves with this big block of marble for lots of reasons, and our goal throughout life and towards enlightenment, although aspirational, is to chip away at that outside to reveal what is already enough and what is already beautiful within us. So that's I'm sort of trying to piece all the past 4 lectures together, and in some ways trying to distill it down to a few takeaways.
It's beautiful.
And that was one of mine.
Wonderful. Thank you. That's a really good analogy. I'd forgotten about that. Yeah.
When you said Alan Wallace, it made me think of Alan Watts. And how he introduced, I guess he was kind of a bridge to the Western world of Buddhism, at least for me.
The Zen teachings, right? It goes way back.
Being an artist, I use clips of, so I made a video at one point that had an introduction using Alan Watts' book. So I definitely resonate with at least how he articulated Buddhism from what I have watched and research on.
Good. Good,
I
good,
don't
good.
know if there's I don't know if I'm asking your opinion on it, but I guess I would just want to make a note that that's for me something that stood out. And
Yeah.
yeah,
No, he's a wonderful teacher.
My favorite Alan Watts quote is, "You don't know what you want because you already have
Oh, there you go.
I think the one I picked was just the dreaming. He was talking about dreaming. Really,
it." That's amazing, amazing. It's one thing to grasp Buddhism in a lifetime, but to grasp them all, like all of the existential theories and practices.
Mm. Okay. Anything else? People online? Very quiet over there. All right. So maybe what we'll do is we'll go ahead and do this meditation. And then if you have any questions or anything else, starts popping up later, then we still have time to do that. So this is Tonglen meditation based on 9-round breathing. So there are, different ways you can do Tonglen. This is actually kind of perhaps a more extensive way of doing it, but that's okay because we have a full half an hour. All right, so we're going to start by just sitting comfortably. So whether you're sitting on a chair or sitting on your meditation cushion, that's all good. Again, as we always say, the most important thing is just to be in a relaxed, open position, and but do try to keep your spine, your back, straight, and your shoulders back a little bit, and your head not like dropping down, but up at a nice, fresh angle, right? Keep your mind, bright. And then, you can put your hands on your knees or folded in your lap. And you can keep your eyes open or closed, whatever's better for you. And so we'll begin by just taking a few, relaxing, gentle breaths. Just take a few minutes to scan your body. Get the head reconnected to the body because we've been doing a lot of thinking. So allow your thoughts to just sort of settle out. And then very gently, if you'd like to, you can bring your attention to the breath. So hold the breath with your awareness. And then simply follow the breath as it passes throughout the body. Wherever it goes, just think that all of the muscles, both internally and externally, wherever that breath passes, think that everything softens, all tension is released. Well, then I invite you to bring your attention to the rhythm of the breath. The natural inhalation, abiding, and the soft release, the exhalation. So without trying to control the breath in any way, just simply observe with your awareness that natural cycle. Okay, so on the next cycle of breathing, on the inhalation, notice the inhalation. And with the exhalation, focus on breathing out through your right nostril. And visualize the air that you exhale in the form of white light, the essence of which is all your positive energy and wisdom. And think that this white light then radiates to all living beings. All living beings in the 6 realms of samsara and beyond. So all human beings, all animals, hungry ghosts, all the limitless hell beings, demigods and gods. You're sending them all of your positive energy, all of your love, compassion, and wisdom in the form of white light on the exhalation through the right nostril. So then think that you're sending out all of that wisdom energy through your right nostril. And then each of the sentient beings who you've called to mind, receive that white energy. It enters them through their left nostril and goes directly into their heart center, giving rise to the experience of great bliss. So you're exhaling your own pure wisdom energy in the form of white light, and it exits your body from your right nostril and then enters through the left nostril all the beings who you've called to mind. And when it enters their hearts, immediately they experience unbelievable bliss. And then we can visualize that their exhalation is in the form of a thick smoke. And the essence of that smoke then is their negativity, their confusion, all of their unhappiness. And think that that dark, polluted energy then enters your left nostril and goes down into your heart. So you're inhaling all of their suffering, you're taking on all of their problems, all of the negative emotions. You're visualizing that all of that enters and goes directly to your heart center. And when it reaches your heart, then that self-cherishing ego mind is immediately destroyed. It completely freaks out. So you can continue that meditation, breathing the white light out through your right nostril, and the black smoke, and coming in through the left nostril. So you can do that 3 times. And then if you want, you can, so either you can continue along those lines, just as we have done, or if you feel like it, you can then reverse it and then breathe out through the left nostril. So breathing out all of your love and compassion, and then bringing in all the suffering through the right-hand side. You can do that 3 times. And then you can also finally then breathe in and out through both nostrils 3 times. So that would be a total of 9 rounds. So we'll continue to do the meditation. So do whichever seems, most comfortable for you. And then one other thing to point out would be to think of, a specific individual who you want to use as your object of meditation, as your object of focus, right? So the more specific you are, the more powerful, the meditation practice is. So it could be a friend, a stranger, or an enemy, depending on what's best for you. And as we wrap up meditation, generate the conviction that you and all other sentient beings are being completely purified of suffering, negativity, dualistic thinking, and that you're fully enlightened. You're experiencing everlasting bliss that pervades your entire body and mind. Okay. Any questions about the meditation? Anything else? All right, then. So we're about out of time.
Ani, can
Uh-huh.
I just maybe toss out a quick question?
Oh, sure.
I was hoping perhaps you might be able to, just from a Buddhist perspective, help us to contextualize all the gun shooting that's going on. It seems so incredibly rampant right now. And I remember you doing a talk a while back on, the Asian discrimination and so on and so forth. But I'm just kind of wondering how you're holding all this, and if there's something that you might be able to share with us to help us with this, what's going on right now.
Yeah, no, it's certainly just horrendous. And so I think the fact that there are more guns in America than there are people says a lot, and that the leading cause of childhood death in America is due to gun violence. I think, it all comes down perhaps to, again, to individual choice and making sure that we make good choices, that we refrain from any temptation that there may be in our part to, match anger with anger. While we ourselves may not be gun owners and have no wish to engage in the purchase of acquiring a gun, right? So still, in terms of our own behavior, though, we do get angry, we do get frustrated, we shoot bullets with our mouths, right? We shoot bullets with our speech. We shoot bullets, with the activity of the mind. So that's something that, definitely each of us as individuals we need to be aware of, right? So the idea of ethical conduct, right?
Right.
Certainly in terms of, political action, then, if this is something that you're passionate about and concerned about, then definitely, speaking up, very, very important, right?
I just wanted to ask, as far as Dharma and like Kali Yuga, as well as the Dhamma cycle, is one of the Diwali the self-awareness. I don't know if that's something you could expand on.
That I'm not so familiar with, really. I cannot say anything about that. I apologize. Eric?
Just for some perspective for everybody, I was in Half Moon Bay this week,
Oh,
I
good
was
Lord.
less than a mile away from the whole thing. And I lived in Half Moon Bay for 5 years before I moved back east. I'm from here, but I lived back there. And the agricultural situation in that town, there are greenhouses everywhere, back in the woods. So you're driving through the trees. They're growing all of your Brussels sprouts, all of your lettuce, all of your mushrooms, all of your artichokes. And the workers live in practical slavery. They are they're almost all undocumented, and their employers use that as a weapon against them, and then keep them in trailers, and sometimes forbid them from leaving the property, like company store stuff. And the man who did the shooting was one of these workers and was tormented for years by coworkers and his employers. He had a family, and I know that a lot of media reports will always paint the picture of the aggressor as the evildoer, but having lived there for so long and met so many of these people, the people that he targeted were people that had been participating in his torment.
Yeah.
So the vagueness of the aggressor and the victim is really prevalent there in Half Moon Bay, because everybody knows, everybody understands the conditions and the suffering that they're all experiencing. And it's not as clear cut as the shooter was a bad man and the victims were good people gunned down.
Right.
I'm not saying it's the opposite. I'm not saying that's not true. I'm just saying it's way more nuanced than that, and there was suffering on both sides. And there were vigils in Half Moon Bay where all people of all faiths, there's a Buddhist monastery there that I visited before the shootings. That Lama was there, and the Archbishop of the local Catholic diocese, and Jewish pastors, and it was just a very much a healing for everyone, and not a blaming, not a you should do this to solve this problem. That's all. I just wanted everyone to know that it's not as clear cut as maybe. I don't watch the media, but I used to, and I know kind of how they spin it. So
Sure.
just keep everyone in your thoughts in that situation.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you, because that does help kind of contextualize the whole situation. Thank you, Ani.
All right. Thank you, Eric. All right, so we dedicate, so all of the positive energy, all of the merit that we've created through the course of engaging in Dharma practice and devoting ourselves, our time, our energy, our interest to learning more about the Buddhist path, understanding that there is suffering and yet there's a way to be free from suffering, and that we all possess within us this Buddha nature. We just need to allow it to manifest. And so by doing so, once we are all Buddhas, and then we will be finally able to put an end to the suffering that all of our mother sentient beings are experiencing, then we'll be in a better position to show people the path so that there is less gun violence, so that there are fewer wars, epidemics, crazy diseases, so that there is, peace and prosperity throughout the world. Okay, so thank you very much. And enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you, Anila.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you later.
You.